Hi, welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina, and today I am here with the founder of Fable Fish Company, Meghan Luck. Meghan is an inspiring entrepreneur deeply rooted in the consumer package industry. Not only is she the daily operator in the business, but it's a 45-year-old family legacy, and she's bringing a unique perspective from her previous career in advertising in the bustling city of New York. She's passionate about the CPG community's generosity and the power of shared knowledge. Today, Meghan will share her journey, the highs and lows of extending a family business, and her insights on thriving in this dynamic industry. Let's dive in. Hey, Meghan, it's so great to have you back on Recipe to Revenue. Thanks for joining me today.
It is so good to be here, Leah. And I feel like every time I get to share a little bit about my story, I feel really lucky. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about the Fable Fish Company. So let's kind of start at the beginning. Tell us about the company. I know you have a really long family history, it's a family-owned business. So kind of set the stage for us. How did this all get started?
Yeah, well, I'll start by just telling you what we make. So Fable Fish makes wild Alaskan sockeye salmon jerky. And like you said, there's a long history and story behind that I can get into. I grew up in Alaska on fishing boats with my family. My mom and dad met on a dock in Cordova, Alaska, which is this tiny little fishing village that's not an island, but you can't drive to it, which should give you a sense of how remote it truly is.
Yeah.
They met, I want to say they were 19 or 20 years old, fell in love, and started building boats and businesses around harvesting the wild ecosystems and oceans surrounding Alaska, everywhere from Southeast Alaska all the way to the Bering Sea. They have this long, I would say half a century history of harvesting those waters and everything from, salmon, cod, sable fish. My dad fished for king crab in the Bering Sea when that fishery was still really strong. So they have a rich history in those waters. I do too, as a result of growing up on boats. I like to say, when we were kids, my brother and I didn't eat protein bars growing up. We ate smoked salmon because wild food has always been such a big part of our lives. It's always kind of been what has nourished us and fed us and also connected us to the natural world. When I was a kid, we picked blueberries all summer, made it in a jam, and that's what we used on toast for the next 12 months. And my dad hunt every fall, and the harvests from the summer salmon fisheries sustained us through the year. And, for a really long time, that was a very normal way of eating for me. And I didn't know any different. I thought that, everybody was skinning deer with their dad every fall in the garage and helping him butcher it. And then that's what would feed the family. It wasn't until later that I realized that was actually an incredibly unique way of eating. And that we were very fortunate to be in those environments, be surrounded by wild food and have opportunities to harvest it. So really my mission with, Fable Fish is giving as many people as possible that opportunity that I've had my whole life, which is to be connected to the natural world through wild food. And I love, doing it with salmon because that has been the nucleus of all of, I would say, the raw material or wild food that we've eaten in my family. Salmon has been the highest consumed, I would say. It's my death row meal. So it's been a pleasure, building a company around that history and being able to carry forward the legacy that my parents built in the harvesting sector, and kind of introduce this new ingredient and this new protein to people in a way that feels really familiar in its format because it's a jerky.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, that is so different than how I grew up, in the suburbs of New York City where, nobody would go out and go harvest or, go hunt their own food, and it was almost like if I knew somebody who went hunting, it was kind of like a unique occurrence. So, it's such an unknown aspect for so many people. But, when we look at our society today and just how packaged everything is, and there's just so much that's coming out now just about, what is it that we're putting into our bodies and what, we think it's healthy, it's not, and all this that, I love what you're doing and being able to bring the food that you are to the rest of the world that is, natural and clean and a healthy protein. That's, not just some protein manufactured bar, right? It is the natural protein, real protein.
We like to say like we do as little as possible to it on purpose, because it's really just the ingredient itself that shines. Like 2 ounces of our jerky has 31 grams of protein, which is insane. That's more than pretty much any protein bar out there. If you look at the product itself, like we do a lot of things and make a lot of decisions intentionally to try to create something that, I've created in my, backyard home smoker my whole life. We keep the skin on the product, for example. It's literally just like a strip of either the neck or tail of the salmon, and keeping the skin on helps from a recovery standpoint and a business standpoint, of course, but also it's the way it's been made for centuries, and a third the weight of that skin is just pure collagen. So there's all of these benefits to not processing the product and to just doing as little as possible to it. That it took a long time. It took 3 years for us to get to a point where I felt good enough to bring the product out onto a show floor and invite people to taste it. So it was a long journey of figuring out, how to make it at scale and not just in a home kitchen for us to finally bring it to market.
Yeah. And I want to definitely hear that part of the story. Let's set the stage even further for those listening. So you grew up in Alaska, you were surrounded by this, and then you had a stint in the advertising world on the East Coast. So tell us kind of about that part of the journey, and then we'll come back to getting the product to market.
Yeah. Well, I graduated college, and I think I was working at a job that had me 2 weeks in San Francisco and 2 weeks in New York. And the first night I was in New York, I remember saying to myself, oh, I live here now. Because it's really wild. And I like to say that, you wouldn't put Alaska wilderness and New York next to each other and think that they're the same. But realistically, they are both incredibly chaotic, wild, crazy places that require a lot of effort to survive and thrive in.
I was going to say, you need a lot of survival instinct in both, right?
And you need community in both of them too. In Alaska, that means that your truck engine went out because it's the middle of winter and you need a neighbor to come jump it for you. But in New York, that means that you need a friend to find you an apartment. So there's community in both in a way that I was really drawn to. And I think at that time in my life, New York felt like a different version of wilderness to me that I was really drawn to. And I ended up working in advertising for about a decade there. And I really loved it. It was, an anthropological pursuit more than anything for me. I think I got pretty burnt out and jaded by it, I would say, by the time I was done, which was, happened to be right around COVID. And during COVID, I'd always said to myself, if the apocalypse comes, all you have to do is get back to Idaho, which is a small town we stayed in the wintertime when we migrated from Alaska. So COVID happens and I was like, okay, I think this is the apocalypse. I have to go back to Idaho.
As closest to it as it could ever be. Right?
So I rented a minivan and drove across the country in the first week where the country was shut down, made it to Idaho. And really quickly when I was there, I rented a house right next to my parents, and my dad started just asking me questions about the family business and slowly drawing me into it in a way that when I look back on now, is obvious that he was trying to pull me in.
I was like, what are we doing here next?
Exactly. And he knows I'm super opinionated about everything. So he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that is our wholesale business. So we have a wholesale seafood business as well. And that is originally kind of what drew me back to this, mission around wild food and reconnection with Alaska and the mountains and wild oceans. I worked on that for about 2 years with him and had operationalized it to the point where somebody like me who, loves to be busy and always looking for a challenge needed something else. And we started talking about this potential jerky product. And, it was for the reason because we wanted a side project, but also we had seen in the supply chain as a result of, shepherding wholesale product through the market, this abundance of underutilized byproduct. So we would be selling these really beautiful center cut portions of salmon, and then the tail of it or the neck of the salmon is just as amazing. It's like it's the exact same piece of fish for all intents and purposes, but maybe it's an ounce under the specification for a program. So, it either gets ground up and put into a burger program or it gets shipped over to Europe and smoked there. And we wanted to do something with it that added value to a really underutilized raw material that's traditionally sold as a commodity, but has been the center of our lives for so long. So that's where it came from too. It was just as much a market need as it was a passion project and getting it started, for sure.
Well, that's kind of the best way to do it, right? You have the passion for it, and there's also a need. Like if you can get both of those things, you're in a pretty good spot to get things going.
Yeah, it was definitely really good timing to be able to start pursuing that. And I think, with the whole story around protein in the market right now too, and just having that be such a big part of the conversation, it's really fun having a product that's not, doesn't have any added protein. We don't have to do anything to it to tell that story. It's just part of the story that already exists.
Yeah, no, that's again, perfect timing for that. And I was speaking with somebody last week and we were talking about trends, and the first one that they said is it's protein. Everything is protein right now. So good positioning. Yeah. So you had the wholesale part of the business and you started thinking about the CBG side. So what were some of the steps that you took to get the product going? And you just mentioned earlier, it took a couple of years to get it to a place that you liked it.
Yeah. I think the hardest part at the beginning was finding a partner that would work with us to produce it at scale. All of the smoked jerkies and smoked fish that you see out there that are salmon are usually made from one of the other 4 species of salmon because they're easier to I guess they have a larger margin for error when it comes to smoking. Sockeye, though, is a denser muscled fish, so it's really easy to over smoke it and get it really tough very quickly. But it's really delicious and clean. Like when I say it has a clean flavor, to me that means it's not super fishy. It doesn't have like that fish oil flavor that a king salmon will have. It's really, really oily if you overcook it. So it was important to us that we used that species, one, because of that taste and like flavor profile, but also because 100% of what we wanted to supply and the raw material we wanted to use for Fable Fish comes from Bristol Bay, Alaska, which is the fishery, I've probably harvested in the most with my dad, and is the largest wild sockeye salmon fishery in the world. It's this insanely huge resource. I want to say last year in, 10 weeks, a fleet of around 1,300 boats harvested 52 million fish.
Wow,
which
that's
is
huge.
mind-blowing when you think about the volume and abundance with that fishery. And it is that way because it's been so well managed. We can get into, how that happens and why it's super important to support. But, going back to what was challenging at the beginning was finding a partner to do that, because we've been smoking sockeye in our, home smoker, but it doesn't need to be food safe. You put it in a freezer and you pull it out at Christmas and it's amazing. And that's not the case at scale. So working with people that we had a relationship with through our wholesale business allowed us to get connected to a co-packer who is absolutely incredible. And I can't say enough good things about how they have supported our process and our progress as we've grown. And I think for me, it's been a lesson a lot in, partnership and choosing who you're building something with, because it makes all the difference. And they've just been absolutely incredible in, supporting our growth and even me as a business owner. So it's a relationship I'm really proud to be a part of, for sure. And I would say that's the biggest challenge. And that was also kind of the biggest success once we got past it, that unlocked a lot of potential moving forward.
So you had a relationship with them, but did you talk to other people before you decided to collaborate with them?
Yeah, we did. We had worked with a different smoker for a while when we were testing out the product in the first year. And the one, they didn't have the same scale, and two, they weren't as willing to work with us on the I guess like the specifics of the recipe, and what makes it really good is like how we smoke it and the specifications associated with the moisture content when it's finished smoking, and all of those little intricacies that are so important to making a final product and guaranteeing its consistency for everyone who's going to open that bag and eat it. So really, they were the first people we'd spoken to where I felt like they had it so dialed in. And that they were going to take care of our product and, take ownership of it in a way and care for it in a way that I would have if I were there every day.
Yeah. Yeah. That you're really handing off that step of the business to somebody who's going to have the same invested interest as you are to bring it to market.
And the reality is, like, no one's going to have the same invested interest as me. But you can get close.
As close.
You can still get close to people who at least care and are invested in doing their jobs really well, which they absolutely are.
Yeah. And what was the actual testing process like? Did you, just go through, got your family together and tested? Did you do formal, testing in the market?
This is hilarious because it shows you how little I knew about CPG when I started this business. And not even when I started it, but when I started experimenting with making it, I was ordering spices off Amazon. And I would order a new round of spices. We'd do a home test. We liked it. And then we send it that recipe. And I would, again, order all the spices to their plant and give them the exact recipe. And, it was not pretty. But I think
the reality of how some people start, though, right?
Yeah. It's like, I didn't even know spice blenders existed. I really had no clue, but there is such power in beginning something. And, I'll also say, and I think this is important to bring up, like, one of the first potential customers that we had for this product wanted us to make it exclusively for them. And some of our initial product development was built off of requests that they had around the product. They wanted us to make it and private label it with their brand. And when we were building the company and started recognizing the potential of it, and it had put at that point 2.5 years of product development into it, of going through every single one of these recipes. And it was a really hard conversation to go to them and say, like, listen, we've put so much into this. I've invested so much money and time and effort into creating these relationships, into developing these recipes. We can't sell this to you private label. We want to, build a business and launch something in the market where we can take ownership of that work that we've done. And that was a really, really hard conversation to have at the very beginning of a business, because I had no idea if it was going to work.
Right. Yes. The risk on that is the risk is higher, but so is the potential reward.
Totally. And it was the difference between saying no to a pretty big PO for a business that I think didn't even have a website yet, versus building something and investing in it long term because I believed in its potential. So that was a really hard decision that we made early on that, now I'm so happy we did. But I think that there's always been, I guess, inflection points in how we've built the thing where I'm like, oh man, if I didn't make that decision, it would have been a lot different now.
Yeah. You would have been down a completely different road.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was their response when you told them you weren't going forward?
Justifiably, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be happy about that either. Yeah. But they're an amazing company, and they're doing really wonderful stuff. So there's no bad blood there, and we would love to support them any way we can.
Excellent. So then, so you got all that sorted. Then you have the product; it's ready for market. Then what was your next step did you go to retail, sell through your website? What was the decisions next?
Yeah. I would say the first step that we took to put it out into the world, we went to the Boston Seafood Show, which again, looking back was like kind of silly because the Boston Seafood Show is for like huge wholesale accounts and a lot of white labeled product and like machinery. But it was the only entrance we knew into the market at that point. We'd gone from a wholesale perspective. So a really incredible organization called the BBRSDA, the Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association, is run by this incredible woman named Milani Dunn. And she supported us and said, hey, listen, we have a booth. Do you want to come and, hawk your product at a little tabletop? And we're like, yeah, sure. That sounds amazing. Because we talked to her about the product a little bit and we went, and it was like overwhelmingly positive response. I was on the floor and it was the first time that people outside, our immediate community tasted the product. And the very first person to taste it was the shelf-stable snack buyer from Walmart.
Perfect.
And she came by and she was like, hey, what would be the timeline? Like, how far out are you guys from POs? What's the timeline for turnaround? Which is, for Walmart, it's obviously years of onboarding, but I didn't have cards. I didn't have a website. I didn't have an email associated with the brand. And the second person to taste it was a snack buyer from Whole Foods. And it was 5 minutes later. So within like 5 minutes, those two people came by and I was like, okay, we can go home now.
We're done. Our work here is complete.
But of course it wasn't. And I sat at that, or I stood at that booth, I guess, for, 10 hours a day for the next 3 days. And I did not leave the booth the whole time because there was such an overwhelming response to it. And I think one of the reasons is because it was a value-added product in that space. So it was unique in the space. Another reason is probably because I was giving out tons of samples and there's not tons of samples on the floor. Whatever it was, it worked. And I would say it was another moment in building the business where the universe or whatever is saying, okay, it's time to take this to the next step. And then after that, again, I knew nothing about CPG, but I, through a friend, heard about the Naturally Network and joined the Naturally Network and showed the product at a spring fling party that they had. And there at that event, it had a really amazing response. And I met the person who is now kind of like my fractional everything. Who has been absolutely essential to the building of my business. So again, I think all these were just moments where I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it anyway. And then
a lot of instinct there. This is a gut feeling. Well, it sounds like even though, it could have felt like, oh, I'm in this room with maybe not the right people, it certainly sounded like a lot of the right people showed up at the table, right away. So
and you never know, you never know what's going to happen when you go and interact with people. Like, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what kind of conversation you're going to have.
Who they know. And, it's so important to be out there. It's people tend to get very reliant on digital. That's my world, digital marketing, but the value of being in person, it just cannot be replaced.
Yeah, I think especially if you are telling a story about what you're creating, it means so much to be in front of a person and have that interaction. And I'll also say, like, one of the things that being in a lot of rooms that I, either didn't feel like I was supposed to be in, or it felt too early, or I wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
Like the night before the Boston Seafood Show, I stayed up till like 3 a.m, putting stickers on like 1,000 clear plastic sample bags.
Yeah.
Because the stickers had arrived like the morning we flew to Boston. So at every point, it's like, okay, I'm not really ready for this, but we're doing it anyway. And I think that the thing that I've been most grateful for in this industry is how generous everyone is in helping a brand grow, because everybody is trying to do that. And it's not an industry where my success is mutually exclusive to yours. It's actually an industry where, at least in my experience, I want to share as much as I can about what has helped us, because that's what was given to me when I first started, which was not very long ago. Like, we launched less than a year ago on shelves.
Wow. Yeah, I think I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is something I wanted to talk with you about. If you come from this space, people in this industry, but if you don't come from the CPG world, where have you found a good place to find, whether it's a mentor or just somebody to talk to and tell you about their experience?
Yeah. I mean, the most beneficial conversations I've had are with other founders, because they are going through the same things. And they have had a similar problem that you're having, or they know somebody who has, and they found a way to solve it. So I think for me, that looks like investing and showing up in spaces where those people are. Honestly, I think food shows are incredible for the potential of meeting buyers and, connecting with the people who are going to drive your business. But they're also equally, if not more, I guess, enriching as a founder to go and spend time with other founders.
Yeah. So if you're not ready to have a booth like you did at the fish show, would you recommend just going and walking around and trying to start conversations with people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I didn't pay for that booth at the seafood show. There's no way we could have. That was a little tiny tabletop that somebody was nice enough to invite us into. And I would say, and I still, don't have full booths at shows. I never have. We can't afford it.
It's expensive.
But it's still a priority to be there and have the kind of interactions that ingrain you into an industry where the community is really, really strong.
Yeah. And there's some good Slack groups, founders, and groups on LinkedIn, or some places that I've encountered a lot of founders. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Startup CPG does so much for the industry. And I think that's a place where I have, you can go on that Slack group and ask any question, and there's like hundreds of people who will get back to you.
I have my Slack channel open here. I think I have 90 notifications. Very active group.
But I think it's a really good example of how open our industry is to helping each other. Once those platforms are created, whether it's like a physical space and a networking event, or it's a Slack channel.
Yeah. So a lot of what you've been saying, I'm hearing is, you really just have to show up. You have to be there. You have to take chances. Is there any other things that you think have been important to your success over this past, 1 year in retail so far?
Yeah. I think accepting that, there's no way that I'm responsible for all of it. And that's from a perspective of there's no way I could possibly manage all of it. And then there's so many other people who have been part of its growth. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning when I was discussing, finding the right co-packer. The partners that I have had in growing this business, it would not exist without them. And there's not a day that goes by where I'm not so, so grateful that I have found people that like know things that I don't and can do things that I can't. Because I can walk in a room and tell a story about Alaska, and I can, talk to you about salmon and the Bristol Bay fishery for forever. But, put me in front of an Excel and it's a very different conversation.
Sure.
So I think the thing that has been that I, credit our success to is the partners that we've been able to find. It can be really lonely being a founder. And I will say, my business partners are my dad and my brother, and my family's really close. So I have that outlet for sure. They don't work day to day on the business, but they do an amazing job supporting it in other ways. But finding partners that you can work with and you enjoy being around and that you're okay traveling with and you're okay being in the trenches with, I think that is the most essential thing in growing your business, because I cannot do it by myself, and I have no interest in doing it by myself.
No, it's a lot. And there's so many moving parts. And I think when you're bringing a team together, no matter how actively or passively they are involved, everybody has their, skills that they're bringing to the table or resources. But how everybody's risk tolerances are, how they deal with opportunity, who they know, their connections, their experience. I'm sure your dad brings a wealth of knowledge from, the wholesale side and how that plays into this. So with all the partners, and you mentioned your fractional person, what does your day-to-day look like now?
Oh gosh. Well, I will say one of the most challenging things about what I do, I think, is just like managing my own time and being my own project manager. Because if I don't look at, I literally have my agenda right here. But if I don't look at that every morning and write down exactly what I'm doing, I will just wander around like a chicken with its head cut off, just being super reactive to everything that's coming at me, whether it's a problem with logistics or packaging that needs to be approved, or a TPR that we need to look at, or some retail marketing that I have to manage a vendor with, or the, Amazon store is going to get shut down because our COI expired. That happened last week. Like any
real examples.
Those are all true examples. But there is so much that goes into running the business. And my goal with my day-to-day right now is to be proactive about the strategic direction of how we're going to grow, as opposed to reacting to the every little thing that needs to happen. And at the same time, we're not big enough and we don't have the resources where I'm still not responsible for a lot of those minute details. That would be amazing, but it's just not the case. So I would say it's like 50-50 right now between reactive work in responding to the needs of the business that day, which are always different, and planning and doing deep work around, how we're going to continue to tell our story, the kind of partnerships that we want to have next year in, supporting communities that we want to be a part of, what our next product looks like and how we can start developing it. Those are the things that it would be awesome if I could spend all my time on, but it's not a reality today. So I try to get as much as I can. And hopefully I'm slowly leaning more and more in that direction as we grow.
Right. Yeah, that's such a big challenge, and certainly something I think a lot of founders, aim to get to that point where they can just focus on that vision part, but it's hard to get to there. So when you're looking at next year and the years ahead, do you see it more focused on the product development side or on the partnership side, especially looking at next year?
I would say we have some really exciting retail launches coming up. And our strategy for growth has been to be really thoughtful about where we're growing. We're self-funded, so we don't have the capital to say yes to everything. which I think in some ways has benefited us because it means that every single decision is run through a profitability model that allows us to understand how it's impacting us in the next 6 to 18 months. So with all that being said, we're launching in Sprouts after a successful innovation set run in 4 days in 360
Congratulations.
stores.
Awesome.
So, we got into the Whole Foods Elite program. So hopefully we'll be launching with them in 2026. There's some other big ones that I'm not allowed to talk about next, but I would say
stay tuned.
The goal is to do those, is to like focus on doing a few things really, really well in the first half of 2026 and show up for those partnerships that we want to build long-term that will be the foundation of our business. And to me, that means like being able to do everything we say we're going to do from a production standpoint, from a TAMing standpoint, from a marketing support standpoint. And then, once that is dialed in, and that takes a long time, looking at the same time towards product development, which I'm really excited about because our mission is to, make wild seafood more accessible. And to me, that means formats and flavors and just different ways for people to have it on, like in their palate that's not the center of their plate. So like a lot of value added propositions that I want to work on in 2026 as well.
Yeah. Do you get more excitement out of doing that or out of the partnership side personally?
I haven't been able to do a lot of that because we've been so focused on partnerships, but honestly, right now it would be I get more out of the partnership side. Like it's very satisfying doing something well for somebody that you're building a relationship with and who is helping grow your business. I think a lot of times what I've seen in the industry is that, these buyers are these kind of scary mythical creatures that we all want to impress. And that's definitely true. But at the same time, they're like human beings who are trying to support us in what we're doing. And my interactions with them that have taken that as the forefront are always more successful than the ones where I'm trying to like really impress somebody and then I like choke and mess up versus having a human conversation with them. And, they're trying to do their jobs well, which means supporting us, and me doing my job well means supporting them. So if I can show up to that relationship well, I would say that is my biggest priority right now as a founder, because that's the thing that's going to, again, be the foundation of our business moving forward. If we can be known as a company that does what we say we're going to do and does it well.
Yeah. Reputation is really everything. There's so many parts that are important, but that's really a backbone to making this successful on the operations side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've given us so many great nuggets of information throughout the episode, but I have to ask you our signature question. And so I'm curious to hear what you're going to say now of that, because there's just, as I said, so many different parts that you could just say, yeah, I already said it. But what has been your recipe to revenue?
I think the undercurrent of everything I've spoken about is like, I'm going to oh God, sometimes I start crying when I talk about this, which is ridiculous.
No,
but
it's not.
Undercurrent of it is like a deep, deep care for the product that I'm creating and the story behind it. And it's such a privilege to be able to share that I think, the recipe that has worked for me is like a passion for what I'm doing, because every single day, and one of my the guy who's helped me build my business to what it is today, said at the beginning of our relationship, every day you're going to get hit in the face by a 2x4 and you're going to have to get back up and like continue working. And that has proven to be the case pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
So I would say like this business is not easy. There's a really difficult path towards profitability. You have to be thoughtful about every single decision you're making, and you have to show up consistently, even when you really, really don't want to.
Yeah.
And the thing that has allowed me to do that is a belief in what we're building and a desire to support, the fishery, the harvesters, and honor the legacy from which I come.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have that, I would not be doing any of this because it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah.
It's too hard, So I think that's the thing that has been the biggest part of whatever success we've had. Is that care for what we're building.
Yeah. Well, I love to see your passion for it. And I'm right alongside with you. I start crying every time I talk about, why I started my business.
Sometimes I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. But you can tell it's just so meaningful to you. This is not just something you're doing to, certainly not to pass the time. There is deep meaning behind it. And again, the history that you and your family have with this is so ingrained, in you and the mission. So, I think, thank you for sharing your story and your love for it. And, so excited to see your growth on these big retail shelves, through this next year.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Meghan, for joining me today. And for people that are interested in finding more about you, share your website or where they can get your product today. You mentioned Amazon already, so anywhere else?
Yeah, Amazon, Sprouts pretty much nationwide, December 15th, direct to consumer on fablefish.co. And then I'm trying to always update my socials, Fable Fish Co. on Instagram and TikTok to make sure everybody knows what's going on and when things are happening and where.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And we will be very excited to see your continued growth and expansion across shelves.
Thanks so much, Leah. It's been a pleasure.